Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of Battle Chads, where we actually are talking about a specific deck or a deck tech, and that is Arclight Phoenix. Now, Luis won quite a major tournament. I know it was an RCQ, but it's quite a major tournament. The fact that it was the first RCQ of that specific region's I guess slot.
Yeah,
Um, and you came away and you got the victory and from what sounded like a really exciting tournament. So Elise, how was your tournament? I guess it was good.
yeah, no,
How
it
was
was
it?
it was very very good. It was one of the first two tournaments that appeared during the first weekend of the RCQ season. I think the other one was down in Cardiff Firestone Games. This is the one that happened up in Castleford in Living Realms. In the UK at least, it was the very first weekend for the Pioneer RCQ season, and very happy to come away with a big win after just one tournament. Amazing feeling after some crushing times during the standard
Yeah,
season.
yeah, definitely.
Um,
And I've been speaking to you quite a bit about Pioneer because it's actually a deck that I've picked up, mainly because I own the cards for it. But it's also quite an interesting deck. And you've been part on this deck for quite some time now, right?
yeah, this is Phoenix is a deck that I started playing back during Modern when it first came to be. It's my beloved card, my pet card, my favorite card. When it was first released, everyone told me it was going to be absolute just crap. It was going to be a bad card. Don't play it. A mythic. What's it called? A little, what do they call them? Jank mythic or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, nope, I think this card's great. I was very new to Magic at the time. I bought a few of them from some friends for very cheap. And suddenly it started rising because it was an all-star card. I put it in a mono red Phoenix at the time. And here I am today with this amazing card, doing some wondrous things, winning good tournaments. And it feels really nice to have been validated after all this time.
So, for the avoidance of any doubt, what does the deck try and do? What is the purpose of the deck? What's the game plan of the deck?
So the way I see Phoenix is, or is it Phoenix, right? Is a control style spell slinger deck. That's what it's really trying to do. It is slightly tempo based in how it plays because it can't get too behind on board. Otherwise, you'll just die before you get to do anything cool. And your main objective is to discard Phoenix and other cards into your graveyard. So you can get the Phoenixes back and use Treasure Cruise to gain a large card advantage on your opponent and drown them with resources while also hitting them with a recurring threat over and over again. That is the game plan, game plan number one for Phoenix. But it is a multifaceted deck that has a lot of different styles of play. You can sometimes play almost like a Delver-like style, where it protects its one creature or objective and gets to the finish line that way. But it is very much an Izzet control deck in the sense of it is consistently keeping ahead in resources and drowning the opponent out by having more resources than them and removing whatever threats they have in play. And that's how Phoenix plays its game plan. That's what it's trying to do.
It's pretty much the only place in Magic, really, where you can play Treasure Cruise in a competitive sort of setting, because it's banned in Modern and it's banned in Legacy.
Yeah, for now at least. Hopefully, I mean, I'm hoping it's staying forever. I love the card, but it is definitely one of those cards that's more powerful than the rest. It is a very impactful card in how much it does. It is ancestral recall. Or is that what it's called? Ancestral recall.
Yeah.
Draw three for 1 mana most of the time, and it's just a ludicrous card. Yeah, sometimes draw 6 with Galvanic Iteration.
So Galvanic Iteration is part of the combo in this deck, right?
Yes, yes. So the combo, it's a combo is a lightly kind of word for it.
It's in there.
It's in there, yeah. So you use Galvanic Iteration and Temporal Trespass. If you use just one Galvanic Iteration plus Temporal Trespass, you get 2 extra turns, which is amazing. If you somehow manage to have the mana for it, you can do Galvanic, copying Galvanic, because it has Flashback, which will then give you 3 turns when you use Temporal on it, which is amazing. It's a great rate if you're able to pull that off.
I've never actually done that, because you can if you do that with its own against itself, it'll trigger twice, which will get you 3 turns.
Exactly.
Including
So the original and 2 copies, which is it's amazing. It's amazing enough when you do it with like Treasure Cruise, With Temporal Trespass, it's a ridiculous combo, but it is a very mana intensive one. It'll cost you at minimum 8 mana, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the 3 blue from Trespass, and the 5 mana for the Galvanic Iterations being cast. 2 for the front side, and then 3 for the flashback. And that's the main combo you have on there.
Yeah, I see. So during that tournament, what decks did you face?
Right, so I faced round 1. It was red-black vampires, which was my only loss to the tournament, funnily enough, and a matchup that I think is usually favorable for Phoenix.
I thought it was favorable.
Slightly, not massively. It's almost 50-50.
Okay.
After that, I faced the Mirror, another Izzet Phoenix deck, a Goblins deck, a Blue-White Spirits, and Ensoul Artifacts. Those are the 5 rounds of Swiss that I played. In the top 8, I faced against another Izzet Phoenix. This was against Duffy, one of our teammates. So it was a civil war, and I luckily was able to manage to defeat him there. In the semifinals, again, another Izzet Phoenix Mirror. This one I won more handily in a nice 2-0 sweep against a very competent player. Shout out to Callum. And then the finals was red-black mid-range. And not the Vampires version as well, just straight up mid-range. Very scary deck to face. They have a lot of tools, but it's one that you can defeat with a little more of that drowning of resources aspect that I spoke about. That's how you want to face that one. And it was a very tough, meta style list. The only odd deck, I suppose, was the Goblins deck. But Goblins, let me tell you, they can get under you very quickly. Very scary deck. But overall, it was a strong run. I was able to defeat the Mirror 3 times. Is it king?
It's one of them. Like if you pick up this deck, and I guess it is probably one of the most represented decks in the format at the moment. If you pick up this deck, you need to be able to navigate the Mirror to some sort of confidently.
Yeah, if you are going to pick up this deck, you need to learn the Mirror. It is a very popular deck right now. It is one of the most represented. You're going to face the Mirror if you go to any serious level of tournament. I'd be very surprised if you didn't.
So what decks do you actually want to see, and what don't you want to see with this deck?
Right, so Phoenix is a deck that definitely has some very... What's the word? Very...
Polarized?
Yeah, polarized, that's it. Very polarizing matchups. You have some weaknesses to things like mono black control, blue white control to an extent, not as much as mono black, or very fast styles of decks, like certain versions of Ensoul Artifact can be very tough to beat, or Lotus Field, because Lotus Field is a deck that is very hard to interact with the tools you have available in Phoenix, and kind of ignores you. And you don't have the clock to defeat them. Those are some of the worst. And then Amalia, the newcomer, can be rough. In the Pro Tour, was found to be a rough matchup. It was negative for Phoenix, but it's mostly Mono Black, Lotus Field, and Amalia that you want to watch out for. Those are the worst matchups, in my opinion. Thankfully, I managed to not face them at all during that top 8 run, which probably goes to show why I did so well. But those are the matchups you really want to watch out for. In terms of what you want to face, I find that whenever you face these more mid-rangey value piles, these decks that try to beat you in a fair game, you are very well equipped against them. Yeah, they may have their Leylands of the Void or some middling graveyard hate, but Treasure Cruises, well, it's just Treasure Cruise. You'll win that game of resource management.
It does seem the kind of deck, though, that the longer you give Phoenix to develop, the worse you're going to be overall. Like if you give Phoenix time, that's probably not where you want to be.
Yeah, it's Phoenix is definitely one of those decks that if you give it enough time, it will just win from nowhere. It's trying to buy time to do its thing. That's usually how it plays out. It's not an aggressive deck by any means. Not in its normal play pattern, at least. It's not trying to just go as quick as possible and get you. Its game plan is primarily control, setting up for the mid to late game to then go off with 1 or 2 Phoenixes, then hit your Temporal Trespass turn if it's game 1, maybe game 2, depending on the matchup, or just have so much card advantage that your opponent cannot keep up with what you're doing, and you'll beat them because they can't answer every single threat you're able to get on board.
So talk us through the deck itself then. So there's some really interesting one-offs. The removal package is split because when I first looked at Pioneer in the last RCQCs, I looked at Phoenix, and I see the removal package has changed, probably since the printing of sets since then. So explain the sort of the creature package, the threat package, the breakdown into the removals, like why the numbers are the way they are, and also your one-offs.
Absolutely. So we'll start with the easiest portion of the deck, the creature package. For Phoenix, obviously, that's the namesake of the deck. For Ledger Shredder, which I actually think is the strongest creature in the deck standalone. It's a card that helps you manage setting up your turns while keeping a board presence and keeping you alive, which is a very important thing, as you'll find from playing the deck. And then Picklock Prankster, which I believe to be the single most important card in the deck right now. It used to be Pieces of the Puzzle. Pieces played that kind of role, but Picklock Prankster is the glue that keeps the deck together. While Treasure Cruise is great, it's much worse without a card like this. This mills 3 cards, because you usually get one back, into your graveyard. It's a very fast way of getting cards into it, so you can Treasure Cruise or get your Phoenixes in there, or just start, doing your combo with Temporal Trespass. You need to fill your graveyard. This is the best card for it. It's a great rate for it. You're getting 3 cards for 2 mana, and then you get another a body for another 2 mana later on. Fantastic card for its effect.
With Piece of the Puzzle, it was the same conversion, wasn't it, in terms of cards in your graveyard? Sure, you got 2 sorceries back, but you still put on the 3 cards in, but at 3 mana, which between 2 mana and 3 mana is massive, especially in this format, how fast it can be. Exactly.
Pieces of the Puzzle was you got 1 extra card because Pieces of the Puzzle goes to the graveyard itself, whereas this one goes into the Adventure Zone. But it was a 3 mana sorcery. You have to tap out for it. And nowadays, at the speed of the game, you can't afford to do it. It's too scary. Your opponent will punish you. Most decks can punish you for tapping out on turn 3. So you have to be very, very careful. So Picklock was a great addition to the deck, letting you go on your end step, free the Fae. Fantastic. It's one of the best plays. It's one of the most annoying plays for your opponents. I got told many times throughout that tournament that they hate this card, and with good reason. The card is very obnoxious. But that's the creature package. That's the main glue of the deck with Picklock Prankster and what they're trying to set up. After that, we have the sorceries. Nothing special here. You have 4 Sleight of Hand, 1 Temporal Trespass, and 4 Treasure Cruise. That's stock these days. It used to be 2 Temporal, but we've gone down on it because, again, the speed of the format, the changes to the hate that's in the format caused us to go down on Temporal Trespass because you couldn't afford to be so greedy with it. And then the instants. This is where it's a little more interesting. So you have the usual 4 Consider, 4 Axe, 2 Spell Pierce kind of package, and 4 Opt. But now you have 2 Fiery Impulse instead of the full 4, as we decided to split 2 and 1 with the Torch the Tower, and 1 with the Prismari Command. Now you may be asking why. So Phoenix is an important deck. Phoenix is very big right now. Torch the Tower is a great answer in the mirror. It gives you that leverage of, you want to rely on that Phoenix you're getting back early? Torch the Tower handles it, exiles it. Fantastic, you get ahead of the game. And then Prismari Command, which is the most controversial of all the one-ofs in the deck right now. Prismari Command is a card that I find to be stronger than the 3rd Fiery Impulse or the 1st Brazen Borrower in the main board because of the amount of hate that's coming in for Phoenix from most decks. They're playing a lot more artifacts and a lot more hearses, a lot more Grafdigger's Cages, and those kind of things that you want to be able to answer, sometimes even in the main board I found. And Prismari Command is the perfect card for doing that while also advancing your game plan. It is a card that allows you to draw and discard Phoenixes or just set up more for Treasure Cruise in the future while still removing the problematic card that your opponent has played. And this is why I like this card so much. And it doubles up as removal.
Yeah, I think I'd Brazen Borrower in that slot, but I found it a bit lacking sometimes because you'd bounce the threat, for example, but the reason I like Brazen Borrower and say other formats, particularly like Modern and Legacy, is that when you bounce something that's way more impactful, against, like, for example, Murktide, they have to put a lot of investment in the permanence. So when you bounce it, it's almost as good as a removal spell, but in Pioneer, it might slow them down a turn, but Phoenix isn't, like you said, an aggro deck. It can win out of nowhere, but it needs to be like a turn 2 removal. It's probably not as good as a turn 3 permanent removal.
Yeah, it's one of those things with Brazen Borrower is while it's a very efficient card at what it does, and it's very good for what it does, the flexibility is amazing. Having the creature on the second side is because Pioneer is overall a pretty fair format in the way that cards interact. While you may be making them pay, the 4 or 5 mana again to play their Shield Dread or the Bat God or whatever, it's not a strong enough card to get that tempo through. Because the best turns would be when you're playing Brazen Borrower on the turn you're bringing back 2 or 3 Phoenixes. But if you're not doing that, you're not leveraging a whole lot of tempo unless you already have a big Ledger Shredder out, which is harder to keep alive than you may think. And that's why I think it's a better card in the sideboard. It is a fantastic card for what it does, but I found it to be too awkward in enough main board situations that I didn't want to run it. In the main, at least. And I preferred Prismari Command for that role because it allows me to keep my game plan number 1 intact while answering any problematic cards my opponent may be bringing in, and just letting me get that one step ahead that I really need to be when things are going on.
It's also like Brazen Borrower. It's just never a dead card. I mean, what is it? The floor on this is what you get a treasure. You do 2 damage to the face. That's the floor, and the ceiling is you remove something problematic and you bin 2 Phoenixes.
Exactly. And you'll find that in some situations, that treasure it makes can actually give you enough mana to play that 3rd spell where you otherwise wouldn't have it, which is more relevant than you may think. So there's a lot of upside on this card. Yes, it is a 3 mana card, so it can be a little clunky, but it's instant speed, and you do have many ways to discard it if need be, if it is that clunky for you. But I found it to be a good enough addition because of the power that it brings that it's worth it.
Cool, so we move on to the land package now?
So the land package is quite standard. There's not much to talk about here, if I'm honest with you. I run 2 halls instead of just 1. Some people like to just run 1 because they find the extra tapling to be clunky. But I find that you mill your Hall of the Storm Giants often enough that having a secondary one in there is important. As it does definitely give you wins in the late game. You'll find that you have a lot of lands with Phoenix because of the amount that you churn through your deck. That it's definitely worth having some powerful manlands in there, and Hall of Storm Giants is the card for me.
One thing I forgot to talk about actually, while I just remembered just now, is the instant speed. One of the biggest engines is the removal spell Lightning Axe. So Lightning Axe will pitch a Phoenix.
Yes,
it's worth mentioning while it just popped into my head just now.
Yeah, Lightning Axe. Most people know it these days. Hopefully, it's been around for a while, but it is a very important card in combination with Phoenix, allowing you to pitch it so you can bring it back on one big combo turn. Aside from that, you then have a card that was new when it was released, really, new to the list when it was released on the Pro Tour. Not a lot of people running it at the time, and even after the Pro Tour, they innovated with it. Because of the amount of Phoenix that's going on, because of the amount of Lotus Field that was going on, and the amount of Amalia that was going on, Ashiok was a great answer to all these decks because it stops the searching and it allows you to mill graveyards and exile them so then they can't get their advantage out of it, or even mill yourself. Something a lot of people miss is you can target yourself with Ashiok to mill 4 cards and still exile your opponent's graveyard because it says you're exile each opponent's graveyard. So you're never exiling your own. It's only theirs. So you can get those extra cards you need in the bin for Treasure Cruise, or maybe even find a Phoenix if you're lucky, while still keeping their game plan down. That's why you run another one in the sideboard as well for the Mirror, Lotus Field, Amalia, those really bad matchups. It really helps shore them up a lot more than you may think. And it's a great card to have in the arsenal. And while it's weird to have these little one-ofs, you have so much card draw, so much filtering, so many cantrips that you will find the cards you need as long as you're being efficient with how you play your deck.
So let's talk about your sideboard options, because sideboard was much different to when I was putting one together. Well, not much different, but similar. But the numbers are different. But I like how clean your sideboard is. So let's talk about each card and why it's there.
We'll go from the top down. So Aether Gust. Aether Gust is a mainstay card in the deck for the most part. It has a lot of uses. It used to be a 2 of, sometimes a 3 of when Mono Green was around, because that was a really annoying matchup. But now, since the banning of Karn, Mono Green isn't a problem anymore, so you don't have to worry about them so much. So Aether Gust has gone down to a 1 of. Still an important card to bring in against Amalia and Lotus Field, especially because of the way that their combos and decks interact. It's a fantastic answer for Dragonlord Dramoka, where otherwise you may not be able to answer it very efficiently. This is why it's mainly in the deck. It does have some leverage against red decks when you see them. There isn't too many mono red decks running around these days, but great card, very efficient for what it does, and it definitely has earned its spot. After that, we have the split between Anger of the Gods and Brotherhood's End. Now, you often see two of one. It has been going back and forth between Anger of the Gods and Brotherhood's End. I like the split. I think the split is very relevant to the meta. With the rise of Ensoul Artifact, this is why I want that one Brotherhood's End, because it can decimate their game plan. It can obliterate either their board of creatures or all the artifacts that they had in play to gain value, or do whatever it is they're doing. And this is why Brotherhood's End is a very important card to have in the deck. But Anger of the Gods, also very strong, because again, it shores up some of those problematic matchups. Amalia is a deck that wants to play from its graveyard sometimes with cards like Rise of the Ranks. I think it's the name of the card. I can't remember exactly. The one that brings a bunch of stuff back in the graveyard. So this is a way
Return to the Ranks.
Return to the Ranks. That's the one. This is a way to fight that combo in their deck, while also just clearing their kind of fair mid-rangey game board plan. They have a Voice of Resurgence sometimes. Clears it without them making the token. Very important thing. Or also against just general aggro decks. There isn't as many of the middling creature decks, but it was a very important card when I faced goblins, for example. And you'll find a lot of those decks stick around. People like to play their creature decks. And it's a card that you definitely want to take advantage of when you can to help you fight through. Then, obviously, the Ashok is just a redundant copy of it for the matchups where it matters. You'll find it more consistently when you have more copies in the deck. That's basically why there's another one there. Now, 3 Crackling Drake used to be 2. It was very often just 2. Recently, it's been found to be a better as a 3 of because of the amount of hate that people are bringing in for Phoenix. So you'll find yourself sideboarding out more Phoenixes than usual to bring in the Crackling Drake so you can fight through their game plan. When they bring in, 4 Leyland of the Void, some amount of Unlicensed Hearse, and some amount of other graveyard hate, you can't really rely on Phoenix or Treasure Cruise. But you can rely on Crackling Drake, because he cares about cards in your graveyard and in your exile, which is a very important and relevant text on the card. Yeah. So, they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm getting all the graveyard, and they can't do anything with it, and then suddenly you drop a 24 power creature on their face, and like, oh, what am I going to do?
What's the biggest Drake you've ever had you can think of?
The biggest one I had was 27, I think it was. This was back during the what's the name of the card? The Pieces of the Puzzle days. I would just churn through my entire graveyard, played a Drake. I had I think 5 cards or something left in the library, and it was there, and it just got him. It was a very long game against blue-white.
So you got the Brazen Borrower there as well.
Yes, and then the Brazen Borrower, I prefer it in the sideboard. It's a card that has a lot of game against blue-white control and the more controlling style decks, as that's where I find its best spot to be, because they have larger spells for you to throw back into their hand and then play the 3/1, which they don't really want to waste the removal on, because they're already answering more important threats like Crackling Drake, or having to deal with your other problematic permanents. Brazen Borrower is just a great extra threat to have, and it handles, sometimes you can just bounce the Rest in Peace for 1 turn and then go off before they're able to replay it, which is an amazing feeling. It's a very good play to have, and Brazen Borrower is the king of that, in my opinion, when it comes to managing your opponent in ways that you might not be able to have.
It's like the ultimate tempo card, isn't it? It's one of the most ultimate tempo cards. You bounce a thing, you play a threat, all in their turn.
And that's exactly why it's in the sideboard. You can play a much more Delver-like tempo-based strategy post-board, because now you're bringing in your things like Negate or Mystical Dispute, your counter spells, to help protect the threats that you're presenting. Whereas in the main board, you only have 2 Spell Pierce. That's not enough to play that game.
Yeah.
Whereas post-board, when you can bring in so many tools, you can leverage that a little better. And that's exactly why Brazen Borrower is in the sideboard instead of the main board for me. After that, you have Tears of Alucard. This is also a controversial often discussed card in the sideboard. A lot of people don't like it. They think, it's too narrow in what it's trying to do. It's a very relevant card against Vein Ripper, so red-black vampires, because it says it can't be countered, so you don't have to pay the ward, and it outright, just destroys the creature before it gains any toughness. At least it will outright destroy it. It's a little bit narrow because it's only flying creatures, but I found it to be good enough because Spirit is still around. The Phoenix matchup, it's a fantastic sideboard card to have, just destroying their Shredder or their Drake where they can't protect it because it can't be countered. And to me, that's good enough to play it. It's a good enough reason, and I've really enjoyed and liked the card. And it did wonders for me this tournament. So maybe a little confirmation bias, but I think it's worth a spot. The other card that people have been using instead of it is Beacon Bolt. I don't like it as much. It's 3 mana and sorcery, but it does have the added tool that it has Jumpstart, so you can play it from the graveyard at the cost of just pitching a card from your hand, which honestly not a bad thing. And it can answer anything. It deals damage equal to instant sorceries in your deck, I believe. Oh, sorry, in your graveyard. So relevant text. It removes any threat to your shielders and all that. But I think 4 lightning hacks is usually enough to remove those threats. But that's why I like Tears of Alikut. I think it's an important card. And finally, last but not least, Young Pyromancer. I love Young Pyromancer. I'm sure people can remember from the good old Mardu Pyromancer days. Very fun card. And it's just a very versatile threat, as people don't often bring board wipes against Phoenix because you're playing few threats at a time, but very quickly. Whereas Young Pyro will punish that because they'll remove their large Supreme Verdicts or their Path of Perils against you. And Young Pyro can punish those kind of decks when they remove that. And it's a card that can gain a lot of advantage in one go, and then the Pyro can, he'll be destroyed or removed, but you'll still be left with the tokens to deal that last bit of damage you need to close out a game.
So if you play that like turn 4, you play the Pyromancer with, say, 2 mana up for cantrips, then they're wasting removal, but your cantrips then have value.
Exactly. And sometimes you can even protect with Spell Pierce, and you get that extra bonus of gotcha. Make a token, stop their spell, and Young Pyro's alive for another turn. Then you just go off, make 7 tokens, and they're crying. They're not very happy. My Soul Artifact player opponent was not happy. I played a Young Pyromancer, made like 3 tokens. They shrapnel blasted it, and then I played another one and made a bunch more. They were not having a good time. It was Young Pyro definitely earned his spot on that matchup, and that's the sideboard.
So you've actually made a sideboard guide for this version of this deck, and how you interpret the deck and how you interpret the meta.
Yes.
You're gifting that to our listeners and our viewers we're going to include that into the show notes.
Absolutely. I'll be putting the list all on the description. You'll have both the Moxfield here link and the Google Sheets link to the sideboard guide. You're welcome to use it. It's for you guys. I may try to update it every so often as well to keep you up to date. If you ever want any information, feel free to reach out to me. I'll do my best to answer as best I can, as Phoenix is a deck that is definitely relying on experience. It is not an easy deck to just pick up. It taxes your abilities as a Magic player in every regard, I think. I think it's the hardest deck to master in Pioneer right now, close with Lotus Field, because it relies on you being able to play Magic, not just the deck. Whereas a lot of decks like Lotus Field will rely on you being able to play that deck specifically. This is a deck that you have to know how to play the game and manage the game itself instead of just the deck. So it's very taxing on the amount of experience you have, how much foresight you have for it, how much thought you put into your plays. And that's what separates the best Phoenix players from the master, number 1 Phoenix players. I'm by no means a master yet. I have a long way to go, but I have a good level of experience. I've been playing Phoenix style decks for going on 6 years now, I think.
Yeah. 2008 printed. When was it printed? 2018.
Yeah, 2018 in Guilds of Ravnica.
Yeah,
and it's I'm very happy. This deck has a lot of meaning to me. It's the first modern deck that I really enjoyed. And yeah, hopefully you guys come and join us and enjoy some Phoenix with myself in the future. I'll be playing it more than likely at the upcoming RC that I qualified for in Lille, France.
And we wish you best of luck in Lille, France. I'm sure you'll do very well. Thank you, Luis, for doing that. It was really so. I found it really interesting. I hope everyone else did. I'm sure they would. And you did say as well that you're open to any questions and comments or even PMs if people want a question about the deck. Is that all right with you?
Absolutely. No problem by me.
Okay. Thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Again, you can find Luis at DuskMTG on Twitter. Myself, the _Pilgrim 2501 on Twitter. And yeah, cheers for listening. I've really enjoyed this pod. Quick fire deck tech. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Caca!
Brilliant.